I am 50% of the Nell component of the panel. I am Nell Minow, sister of Martha Minow. That's my connection to the law school. And I am delighted to present you with this panel. And sister of Mary Minow, thank you. I was going to get to that. Watch out or I'm going to have them all sing happy birthday to you. No. Okay, so I would never do that to my baby sister. Okay, so Nell Scovell has got a fabulous book coming out, which I hope she'll tell you about a little bit. But I learned a new word in the book. She's come up with the term penthousing, which is the opposite of slumming. So I realized that is what I'm doing on this panel. I didn't go to Harvard Law School, and I'm not in the movie business, but I am honored to be penthousing with these extraordinary, talented people. Now, I could either read you their resumes, or we could have the panel, because it would take up the entire hour to tell you how distinguished they are. So just check out IMDb and read Nell's book, and you'll find out a little bit about that. So what we're going to do is get right into it. Okay, and as I promised, it's going to be a lively conversation, and we're going to talk about both show and business. So I'm going to begin by asking, it's sort of the conventional wisdom right now, and I'd like to hear you respond to it, that smart stuff is on television now, and dumb stuff is in theaters. That what we have in theaters is a lot of superheroes, a lot of chases and explosions, not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm a Comic-Con attending fangirl, but that what we have on television is the thoughtful, creative, complex storytelling. I'd like to know whether you think that's right, and if so, why? So we'll start with you. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are first?
I write comic book movies. No, I'm teasing. My name is Jeff Pinkner. I've written and produced television and now written feature films. And apparently I'm penthousing too. I'm impressed. I think that it's true to make a stereotype. I think it's true. I think that in order to get people out of their houses now to go to the movies, you have to give them a spectacle, or at least that's the conventional wisdom. And the movie studios, based on their economics, are spending an enormous amount of money and therefore need, per movie, and therefore need tremendous returns. Whereas I think TV, the budgets are smaller, the storytelling is more adventurous, people are prepared to watch serialized storytelling on television in a way that they never were before, starting with a show like The Wire, I think, which really sort of instigated the novel as filmed entertainment, novelistic approach to filmed entertainment. And the more people have gotten comfortable with it, the more that creators are finding that as a place for content.
Deborah Martin Chase, film and television producer. What else in this short? I think that the bar has been raised substantially by television because it's character driven, you have time to tell stories, you have space to tell stories. And because some of the best and smartest and most talented people in the business are involved with television now. It used to be in the old days there was a stigma against TV. If you were a film person, you didn't deign to do television. Now everybody wants to do television because you have a lot more freedom to tell those stories. I think the movie business has become two businesses. I think the studio business is the big tentpole event, swinging for $1 billion at the worldwide box office every time out business. And that's very different from the independent, quote unquote, independent, Fox Searchlight, Focus, Sony Classics business, which is still character driven and which can give you a Moonlight or 12 Years a Slave. So I just think the business, because distribution's different, because, it's competitive. Everybody now is competing against each other. I mean, Game of Thrones is spending $30 million an episode, and shooting for 42 days. So that means you're getting a feature film every week on Game of Thrones. And so how do the studios are trying to compete against that? And it's a different business.
You made a point that reminded me of something about the time that you get to tell a story on television. And when I was at Comic-Con, I went to a panel discussion of production designers, and somebody said, "What's the difference between working for movies and working for television?" And I immediately thought, well, it's going to be budget, it's going to be aspect ratio. And he said something that has really stayed with me. He said, in a movie, you get the script and everything you need to know about that story is in the script. In television, if you're lucky, it could go for 3 years, it could go for 10 years, it could go for longer than that, and you have no idea where it's going to go. And so I have to put in a lot of extra doors. He said sometime 3 years in, they're going to come to you and say, the characters need to get from the top floor to the bottom floor without taking the stairs. And you're going to say, fortunately, this door leads to a dumbwaiter. And he said, you just have to put in a lot of extra doors because you have no idea where the story is going to take you.
I'm Paul Attanasio. I write and produce film and television. I don't know, what was the question? Is it smarter?
Are there smarter stories on television now?
Yeah, I mean, I probably, but Deborah's right. You can't really do better than Moonlight, and so, there's always opportunities for different things in different places, and there's a lot of really dumb TV. So, yeah, I think it's true, but I think you could overstate it, and I think there's still wonderful work being done in both.
I had all this time to prepare an answer, and I didn't. I think TV is more emotional than most movies. I think you become friends with the characters. You get to know them. You're rooting for Khaleesi, or so we're just more emotionally attached to those characters, and that's the decision for movies to make sequels only for comic books, where you're not really emotionally attached. I kind of would like to see what the Spotlight team is doing now, and we never get those sequels.
Does it, anybody can jump in now, we're not going to just keep going up and down the line. Does it matter that the way that writers are, I'm going to say, ranked or treated on television versus movies? Isn't it true that on movies they're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, and at TV they're more at the top?
Certainly in television, the writers are the producers. They are the top of the totem pole. But it occurred to me two things listening to you guys talk. In television, it used to be there were only broadcast networks, and they had a certain responsibility to make programs that were broad in their appeal, and there was a lot more standalone, procedurally based, comfort food type television programs. Mm-hmm. And now, with both the explosion of the marketplace and the cable networks, there is a lot more. The shows can be more specifically designed. They don't need to have the same gigantic audiences. And the character storytelling over time is what really attracts people, I think. And it attracts a different kind of writer. Absolutely, in features, the writer, if it's between producer, director, and writer, the writer is the most disposable in the equation. It's just the truth. Whereas in television, it's all writer-driven. But I don't think that necessarily makes one smarter or dumber. There's a lot of producers and directors who are geniuses.
Wait, I have a good story, because a friend of mine wrote and directed U571, John Mostow, and after that, he had a meeting with the producer, and they kept him waiting 20 minutes, and they finally ushered him in, and the producer was on the phone talking to someone else. He finally wrapped up that conversation and said, hold on, I just have to take this one other phone call. And he's sitting in the office, and the guy's on the phone and finally says, I'm here with the writer of U571. And John went, I directed it too. And the guy went, gotta go.
By the way, I think that's a very underrated movie. I like that movie.
I like that movie,
Yeah.
too.
Yes, that is as a non-writing producer who works in both mediums, there is a big difference. I mean, television is about the writer or the showrunner, and I think the results show that to some extent because you get a vision. And yes, you have notes from the network and you have notes from producers and whatever, but it is as close as you can probably get short of an independent, self-financed, movie by a writer-director to having an artistic vision. Mm-hmm. And that's another reason why some of the TV is so exciting right now, because you have a single voice.
Does it affect the way that you think about projects or the way that people react to the projects that binge watching has become such an important factor that so many shows, the entire season is released and everyone just stays inside all weekend until they've watched it all?
I mean, I think now, what it is what Jeff said. It's it affords you novelistic storytelling, which is a different, very different from either movies which are more analogous to a short story size story, or broadcast TV, which is more like a crossword puzzle. It's you can really spread out and create a world. And there's an audience for it, a big audience. So it allows writers to write that way, and those stories, and write those stories. So you can't shrink Anna Karenina into a 2-hour movie, and that's why those movies on those 19th century novels always feel constricted, because it's not really the way movies are designed to be told.
I'm going to do a little advertising. We're going to talk about this a little more in my panel right after this. But, look, we're at a time of disruption in the entertainment business. And Netflix and Amazon have obviously, become an enormous presence. And they introduced the concept of binge watching. And so as much as anything, it's the audiences getting used to watching in that manner. And so the networks in particular are struggling with, nobody watches live TV anymore. I mean, that's why there's a premium on sporting events and things that are happening right now that you want the answer to. So, I mean, I know I could wait till the end of the season and stack it up so then I can binge watch what is delivered on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm. So I think more and more people who are not designed to facilitate binge watching are going to have to figure out how to accommodate that appetite in the marketplace.
There's also something else happening, at least in television, which is, and I'm guilty of this, you wait until the end of a season and then you decide whether or not it's worth watching.
Yeah, no, totally.
Truly.
Absolutely.
Or wait until 2 or 3 seasons in and then you go, well, I can catch up and watch it all. And or on the flip side, Netflix will suddenly advertise something. You're like, I've never even heard of it. It's only 4 hours of my time, all 8 episodes. I'll invest. It's like reading a book over a weekend. And I don't think there's any outcome. It just it is what it is. But it's definitely changing people's approach to how they receive entertainment.
Well, when I was growing up with my 2 sisters that I mentioned, Martha and Mary, we would go to school and everyone would say, did you see Laugh-In last night? Did you see this Batman last night? And we don't have that experience now of everybody having seen the same thing at the same time. So I think that part of it has really changed.
Yeah, and for my childhood, it was Mork and Mindy and The Cosby Show. Thursday nights, the whole family, everyone's family stayed in and watched those shows.
Yeah.
Do we reach a moment, though, where we don't need any more TV? I mean, my sons just binged House.
Yeah.
And they loved it. Paul was the executive producer. And, right?
They binged the whole thing.
Well, they binged a lot of it. Yeah. I know, it's a lot of
It's
hours.
100 hours of television.
More.
Well, I guess I should have been more impressed than angry.
That's what summer vacation is for.
Exactly.
But at some point, do you need more if you have all this great TV and now we have access to it?
Yeah, my all-time favorite TV show ever is on Netflix, The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The best.
it is still the best. So what's the answer? Do we need new TV? We have so much old TV.
We need more TV. You know, it is pretty amazing that there are 450 shows on the air now. And yes, you have access to all these old shows. And yet there is an unbelievable appetite for content. Unbelievable. It is not diminished whatsoever. And new companies coming in and saying they want to get into or Facebook putting $1 billion behind entertainment, Apple putting $1 billion behind entertainment, Google. These are big players putting in real money to buy content. And then traditional providers, I think you can really overstate the degree to which companies like CBS or Disney are out of the game. They're really not. And they still draw a big audience. So, and it's a worldwide marketplace. So you would think, I think on a kind of existential level, you could say, well, wouldn't it be better if people went outside and gardened or something? But on a business level, it's just not going away. There's no shakeout. There's no bubble. There's more players, and everybody's buying, and it's kind of unbelievable.
Don't you think it's a bubble? I think it's going to burst.
Well, I think,
Well, why hasn't it burst already?
yeah, I think the change that's going to happen is, and this will be more for the shape of the business, is the demise of cable. It really is all going to streaming. And so, right now, I mean, this may be blasphemy for some people, but I'm never watching the Golf Channel. It's just not, and I have We on my TV because I get it as part of my Spectrum bundle. So as that unbundling happens, a lot of these channels are going to go out of business because everything's going to switch to streaming.
But you see all these new channels coming on streaming like Crackle.
But those
and
will, but those.
what's it
will
called? Free form or
As
whatever.
long as they can, that's why for all of us, but also as a producer, everybody's looking for that hit, that water cooler zeitgeist thing. So if you are Crackle and you're trying to establish yourself, you need your, House of Cards. You need your thing that puts you on the map, that becomes that is your stake in the sand, so that people will start tuning in, and then you can build a platform on the back of that.
I think all of us are probably old enough to remember when Fox was Crackle and Fox was taking shows that all the other networks rejected, and then all of a sudden they got 90210
the X-Files.
and the X-Files, and they were on the map.
I think to me, what I can't process or I don't know what the future will bring is my daughter, who's 15, talks about YouTube stars.
Yeah.
And truly Snapchat stars, like the celebrities of her generation are people that not only have I not heard of because my head is in the sand, but I would have no reason or access to. So I think less likely that the television business craters and like what people receive as entertainment changes entirely.
Yeah, I have a friend who's an executive with Amazon, and he tells me his children never watch television or Amazon. They watch YouTube.
My nephew, I asked him about a television program, and he said, no, that's not on. And he meant because it doesn't come to him over his computer via Hulu.
Right.
That it doesn't exist for him. He literally, and he's a freshman in college. He doesn't even know what it is.
I think, yeah, my kids don't own televisions. They just watch everything on stream.
That's what I'm saying. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I, have done a lot of work with the Disney Channel over the years. And it used to be, every kid watched the Disney Channel. I mean, that was like a common denominator. They're like, they've completely shifted their business model because kids are on YouTube, and so they've gone to event programming in order to make, and a bit of binge watching, like they're introducing a section of a season all at one time because they know that's how young kids are used to watching.
Well, then I'm interested all of you have pitched projects many, many times. You're all very experienced. I'd like to hear some stories about that. But particularly, you have a project. How do you decide of all of these different kinds of outlets and all of these different kinds of opportunities? How do you decide where to take that project and how to craft the project to appeal to the different kinds of outlets?
We're all relatively old.
Thank you.
So you get younger people involved to go in the room and pitch with you.
Is that right?
Yeah, more or less. But you do tell a story for an intended audience, and whether you're pitching a comic book movie to a big studio for an intended audience, or whether you're pitching a novelistic approach to television, you're probably not. You need to, as always, you need to indicate a passion for what story you want to tell, but you need to pitch an understanding of who it's intended for.
Right.
I have to tell this story because it's about what Jeff just said. There was a guy, this is a true story from like 10 years ago. It was a guy who was an older writer, and he couldn't sell because like everybody wanted youth. So he brought his son-in-law, who was a dentist, to the pitches. And they were a writing team, and the executives would address all the questions to the dentist. And that's a true story.
Hilarious.
That's a true story.
And he sold.
So there is
And
some,
the project is?
And,
I just sold something which it's not as much like where do you decide to sell it. It's that you will find somebody to buy it, and that's really great for writers. So I have this project that could not be more obscure. It's directed by Wong Kar-wai, who's a Hong Kong art house filmmaker. I'm sure the people who love film know him, but others wouldn't. And it's set in two different historical periods, and it deals with Chinese immigration as a theme. Very expensive, and we sold it.
The Golf Network.
No, we sold it to Amazon. Because there's it's like my dad used to say every pot has a cover about dating, but it's true. It's really true because there's so much competition. There's so many buyers. It's really exciting that you can pitch something like that and sell it and get budgeted for, like I said, for a really significant, amount of money, production budget, not quite $40 million an episode, but and that's exciting. And so it couldn't be a better time to be a writer in Hollywood.
Is that right?
And just as a non-writing producer, I second that because, a few years back, I really started just thinking of myself as a content provider. And for me, it really is about finding exciting material, a great writer, and then we figure out where's the best platform for it. Be it, cable, streaming, network, small indie feature. And that's exciting because then you can be passionate about the story you want to tell and try and find the right home for it, as opposed to try and, reverse engineer that.
I made a television show called Fringe, and the head of the network at the time said, I don't understand your program. I don't like your program, but my 3 best friends love it, and so it'll stay on the air as long as you keep satisfying my 3 best friends.
That's really funny.
Also a true story. But our attitude was, and this is true now of television, I think more than film, and much of this conversation, the subtext is, for television, it's a fantastic time. For television, you don't need to. I think 30-something got canceled with a 20 share.
Yeah.
And now if you get a 2 share, you're a hit. And that was 30 years ago. It's not, or 20 years, not a tremendous time. We used to say that our show was like licorice. Not everybody likes licorice, but people who like licorice really like licorice.
Right.
And if you can do that, if you can find an audience that's impassioned for your characters or your story, you can stay on the air for a long time.
As a movie critic, one thing I think a lot is about the casting choices that are made, and I'm very interested to hear. You in particular have brought some really major talents to the screen in early performances. How do you think about that, and how do you how do you deal with the pressure that they want a name, or they want a money person in there when you're bringing in somebody new?
I mean, they're kind of 2 separate things. So in some instances, you really do need the name. I mean, that's like the make or break for your project. Sometimes you can cast around a lead with names because, again, given the changes in the marketplace, actors will take a meaty. I mean, look at Big Little Lies. I mean, you had these 3 amazing actresses that, 10 years ago would have been like, excuse me, needs to be mine. It's just it's a different attitude.
Or wouldn't have done TV at all.
Oh, totally. Yeah, start there. Yeah. So, but that being said, the part of the fuel of Hollywood is new talent. And so when you find those people that just have the it factor, that you just feel it in your bones are going to be big stars, you figure out how to position them, support them, push them, fight for them so that they get their shot, because then you're like a hero.
Yeah, and maybe Anne Hathaway will remember you when she gets her Oscar some years later.
Yeah. Yes. No,
No, there's an old saying that stars don't make TV, TV makes stars. And I think that's very true. But the networks never learn the lesson, and they always want the stars, and it's unfortunate.
The problem
Both
is,
are true.
Yeah.
the problem today, I think, for everybody is that there is so much noise in the marketplace. I mean, we are, for every person, every minute of every day, we are bombarded with so many things to get our attention. And it's so cluttered that, studios, whoever, are looking for ways to break through, to get their message out there. And so a title, that's why everything, Lethal Weapon, blah, 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 everything's reborn because it's got a built-in fan base. And if you say Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon are going to be on TV, that gets your attention.
And I think the networks are getting more conservative, in my experience. The ABC, NBC, CBS, and then to a lesser degree Fox, they're getting more conservative because they're less willing to take chances when they're up against Nicole Kidman on HBO. And so they're looking for IP with a built-in, what they consider a built-in audience, right or wrong, and stars that they consider who are going to automatically attract an audience. And I can't speak for anybody else here, but I think that television does make stars, and that you're better off having a lead actor or actress who is not a familiar face, so that they don't come with a certain sense of expectation. And then you can build a program around them. But that marketplace is conservative.
I just heard a presentation by one of the guys from Shark Tank, and he said that when they got the show together, the network said, okay, we're looking for that core demographic, males age 18 to 35, that's who we're going for. And what surprised everybody was that it turned out to be a super popular show with families. People watch it with their children. And so now it's been sort of put into that category. Do you think when you're creating a project, do you try to reach that very appealing, high purchasing group of the male 18 to 35?
Well, my entire career, networks have come to me and said, we want you to create a show with a strong woman at the center. And I write I pitch the idea, I write the pilot, and they never put it on the air. So,
Because she's not relatable.
and yet, so I started going in and pitching, stories with men at the center, and they're always, well, we're surprised that you would do that. And
Gotta eat.
well, yeah, but it's also, I really hate the idea that men can write women, but women can't write men. So there's that old saying that boys read about boys and girls read about boys, but boys won't read about girls. And I feel like it's become this self-fulfilling prophecy that it starts young and they get used to it, and now we're stuck.
Well, that brings me to the question of why has Hollywood continuously failed, not to create a prejudicial point of question, but why has Hollywood done so poorly in representing women, minorities, people of different abilities? Actors love to play disabled characters, but disabled actors almost never get cast. Actors love to play trans characters, but they very often don't cast trans actors. Why has Hollywood found that hard to make progress on? Or tell me that they have made progress.
Well, I'll start in particular women and minorities. The general wisdom for a long time was that, let's just start with television, is that you couldn't have a successful show with a crossover show with a black lead, and it was hard for women as well. And part of that is also who's making the decisions, because just to be honest, Los Angeles is a very segregated town. It just is. And so people in Hollywood live in a bubble. And so as the rest of the country was changing, people that lived on the west side of LA weren't really realizing how integrated and multicultural this country had become. So it started, really, I go back to Scandal. I think that had a huge impact because ABC was not comfortable casting a black woman in the lead. Not because they just didn't
Even though it's based on a real-life black woman.
But that's why, ultimately, that was the thing that was because they were like, they knew they would get killed. Yeah. Right? Because it was based on Judy Smith. So it was, and it was Shonda Post-Gray. She had influence. You had some very strong black female executives at ABC. But the ultimate thing was that it was based on Judy Smith. And so it was with enormous trepidation that ABC cast Kerry Washington. And then lo and behold, everybody was watching the show and was like, okay. And then that led to, Blackish, that led to, Murder, and then Empire took it over the top because here was an all-black cast, and it became the most successful television debut in over a decade. And so that kind of opened the door.
But I think there's a fallacy that Hollywood is ahead of the curve and leading our culture. I think they're 20 years behind. I look at Scandal and think, we had Condoleezza Rice, the Secretary of State during the Bush administration.
Thank you.
Yeah, and as much as there is a president of a network or someone who's making a decision, it is a conservative business. And they're answering to corporations, and they have to. Their slate in television, their slate for that season needs to make them money, or else they lose their job. So, it's not a culture of fear, but it's a culture of risk aversion. And so somebody needed to be first, And then when it works, people are, oh, see, we're now chasing somebody else's success. To your question of trans actors and disabled actors, it's also, again, it's a culture of conservatism, and I don't have a lot of knowledge of the pool of trans actors. I just don't know how many there are, and I don't know how many. So if it's a story about, the moment will come where a trans actor is not playing a story about a trans character. That's when things will start to really change.
I think in her new show, Laverne Cox is not playing a trans character. I think she's just playing a woman. I think.
I'm going to defend Hollywood.
Okay.
Because everybody's bashing Hollywood. So I think
I wasn't bashing it.
No.
I think,
Yeah.
you know, I think, well, you know, I think the whole story of American history is about perfecting the Union and living up to the promise that it was founded on. But, you know, even just to talk about a trans actor, you know, you do have a not trans, but you have a transvestite personality, RuPaul, who reaches 1 million people a week, has been on the air for 9 years. So, and that show broadcasts all over the country. It broadcasts very well in the Midwest. So, you know, that was unthinkable 50 years ago. That RuPaul, with the content of that show, would be something that people would let their kids watch. You know, so I think we're doing, I do think we're doing better than, you know, can we always do better? Yes, but I think we do better than other countries. I think we do make more of an effort. I think there's, you know, again, to talk about, you know, I have a show that's Chinese actors, Chinese language, Chinese themes. That's a big budget American television production. And that's great. That's possible, though. You know, that's really possible now. And, you know, I'm not disagreeing with anything anybody said, like, are the broadcast networks conservative? Yes. You know, and so forth. But are the cable and digital outlets conservative in the same way? I don't know. No.
Well, the Chinese box office, as you know, is a huge part of the market, and some of you may know that when they did the remake of Red Dawn, they couldn't make Soviet Union the bad guy anymore because they weren't around. So they made China the bad guy, and then somebody reminded them after they made the movie that the people in China buy a lot of tickets, so they went in and digitally changed all of the Chinese uniforms to North Korean. So,
you know, I really think it's a mistake to always say, well, you know, it sucks, and not to recognize at the same time the progress that's been made and the achievements of people, you know, that The Cosby Show was the most popular show in America with an African-American lead, you know. That's just a historical fact, you know. So I don't see that happening in Great Britain or Germany or China or Sweden or Japan. So, you know, I think we can do better, but I think we do actually do pretty well.
I just, you know, the statistics still for women and minorities, certainly behind the camera and in the executive suites, are pretty abysmal. I mean, if you look at the USC Annenberg School for Social Change and Diversity put out a study earlier this year, it was like heartbreaking. You know, of the top 1,000 movies over the last decade, you know, 80% of the women that had made a movie only made one, whereas like over 50% of the men had made, you know, 2 to 4. No woman had made more than 4 movies, where, you know, it was I mean, it was just like, and then you get to, you know, blacks and Asian Americans and Latinos. And so I just, yes, things are better, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, well,
And
I didn't want to overstate in the other direction either, and those numbers are appalling.
And they also look at,
Appalling,
yeah.
And there's really no reason for it.
Just to add a couple things to the conversation, part of it is when you're talking storytelling, not the job. Storytelling is audience-driven. If audience wants to see stories about X, those stories will get made. Because the film, the studios, they want to make money. They want so as the audience is more accustomed or more interested in certain stories, we're seeing it in television. As far as jobs, it's never going to be enough until it's an absolute, until everything is either gender neutral or race neutral. But it's getting better. Some of the hottest directing names in television right now, deservedly so, are women.
And yeah, there's shows
And you
like
couldn't have
Queen
said that
Sugar
5 years
where
ago.
the
no, totally.
yeah.
The business has changed a lot in the last 5 years. And so, there's a long way to go, but we've gone from like nothing to...
We're on the right track at
We're
this
on the
moment.
right track because, because Hollywood has figured out there's money to be made in diversity with women, whereas before they were afraid to take the step to find out.
But aren't there still studies showing that, by lines of dialogue, that the male characters have all the dialogue, and that even Gina Davis has done some great work on this, that even, when the cop comes to the scene of the crime, maybe it could be a woman or a minority, because there are female and minority cops, but they, the mailman, the surgeon, all of that, they've not done a lot. So that even in the crowd scenes, it's mostly men.
It's relative from nothing.
Right, okay.
to at least now I can say, and literally it's been like, it's real, some of it was actually behind the Oscars So White campaign, which really as much as any, I was almost pissed off at the beginning because I was like, oh, here we go again. Like, people are talking, nothing's going to change. But this time it did start to change consciousness. And so that at least like when I go to, I'm at CAA, or I talk to a network about putting together a writer's list or a director's list, and of course we're going to have women and minorities on the list. Before, you give them a list of 10 men and be like, okay, let's go. I mean, there was no consciousness that things should be viewed differently.
And also, personal experience, it used to be that there was a token, either on a staff, whether it was age or color or gender. And now it is becoming more of a level playing field. And it's not going to happen instantaneously. We all may want it to, but it's not going to happen.
Nell talks about that a lot in her wonderful book, and about being the woman in the room, the one woman in the room, and then it's sort of like when you die, we'll bring in another woman, right?
My favorite story is recently, about a year ago, a young woman, and I try to mentor and sponsor as many as I could, wrote me a very sad note saying she was giving up. She was just sick of being rejected, and I wrote her a pep talk and, what I told myself to keep myself going. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, she writes me a note. I wanted you to be the first to know. I just got this job. And she told me what the job was. I had been up for that job. And she took the one
Hollywood
female
story.
slot. I was very happy for her.
That's really funny.
But there's a recent study that said if a room is, or a boardroom is 17% female, they think there's parity. The men think there's parity. And if there's 30% female, they think there are more women than men. And the quote I love so much is, if you've been privileged all your life, equality looks like oppression. And I think that's where so much of the work needs to be done.
I agree. We're going to have a few questions from the audience in a moment, but so start thinking about your questions, but I have a couple more. My first question is, Tell me something you've seen in movies or in television that surprised you, either that was better than you thought, that was worse than you thought, that came from an area that you weren't expecting.
Oh, Get Out. I love Get Out.
I loved Get
And
Out.
it reminded me of kind of those old, like, defending your life, like when people would just make movies that were funny, but also kind of essays and philosophical.
Yeah, I highly recommend Get Out. It's still my #1 of the year, but now we'll see what comes up in the fall.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I just brought up Moonlight before. I guess I wasn't expecting anything. And that's just a really good movie. And that's, a relatively young filmmaker making very bold choices and really, doing it the old-fashioned way. It's just a really beautiful film, which I think you're quite right about. I think if there hadn't been, if somebody didn't kind of stamp their feet a little bit, I think that movie would have been marginalized, because it is an art house film, and then because it's got a mostly black cast, it's just easy to marginalize, and I think it would have been. And that's a film that really does not deserve to be marginalized. That's as good as anything I can think of, that film. And so, good for everybody.
Yeah, I love that movie.
13 Reasons Why.
Really?
Yeah, I just think, I thought it was exceptional storytelling. I thought and having done, I play across all fields, but have done a lot of work in kind of the YA sphere, I think it was revolutionary because it was a story told about young people with such depth, and just the quality of the writing, the poignancy of the characters in the story. I mean, I loved it.
That's great.
And has the controversy surrounding it surprised you?
No, but I think I have to imagine a lot of the controversy comes from subject matter as opposed to people who've actually seen it. Because I think once you see it, for me, you're struck by the
It's a movie about a girl's suicide.
A teenage girl who commits suicide. But by the end, you're just struck with, oh my God, had she been able to see, had she had this perspective, she never would have killed herself. And so I actually look at it as I mean, I know there's been a lot, but to me, it's a cautionary tale, a lesson, as opposed to encouraging people to commit suicide.
Well, yeah, I agree. I thought Get Out was spectacular and surprised me. The thing to not give the same answer, I watched Stranger Things, which I thought was phenomenally rendered, but what really surprised me about it was how quickly that what felt like a grab bag of tropes from my childhood are now seen as like new all over again. That there's this whole, well, again, we're old. But not only are we old, but I think that very quickly, like the rhythms of storytelling are changing so much that people of a certain age group and younger don't watch anything older than, whatever, pick a year, because they think it's just not going to appeal to them. So what really surprised me about that was how quickly our storytelling is getting turned over.
I actually was a little afraid to watch it because I thought I was too old to get all of those 80s references. I fell so deep into the well on that one that I watched the entire thing in less than 24 hours. I loved it so much. It was a brilliant show. I love all your choices. They're all great.